A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars Dark Nest 1 The Joiner King by Troy Denning. Prologue. The feeling had returned again, a sense of desperation that burned in the forest like a faraway star, clear and bright and beckoning. Jaina Solo found her gaze straying through the Justice ship viewport, out into the blue-flecked void that hung behind the slowly spinning cylinder of Detention Center Max Sec 8. As before, the sensation came from the direction of the unknown regions. A call for what? And from whom? The touch was too wispy to tell. It always was. Jedi Solo. The Inquisitor stepped closer to the witness rail. Shall I repeat the question? A tall, stiff woman with a shaved head and deep lines at the corners of her gray eyes. Athadar Jihad had the brusque demeanor of a retired military officer. It was a common affectation among petty Reconstruction Authority bureaucrats, even when the only notation in their service record was a decades-old planetary conscription number. When you boarded the Night Lady with Jedi Lobaka and, sorry, Inquisitor, I did hear the question. Jaina shifted her gaze to the accused, a massive Yaka with an expressionless, near-human face. He wore an engraved Ithorian skull on the lateral cover of his cybernetic implant. Red Star's crew tried to turn us away. A glint of impatience showed in Jihad's gray eyes. They attacked you with blasters, isn't that correct? And it was necessary to defend yourselves with your lightsabers? Right again. Jihad remained silent, tacitly inviting her witness to elaborate on the battle. But Jaina was more interested in the sense of desperation she felt in the Force. It was growing stronger by the moment, more urgent and frightened. Jedi Solo. Jihad stepped in front of Jaina, blocking her view of the inquest salon. Please direct your attention to me. Jaina fixed the woman with an icy stare. I thought I had answered your question. Jihad drew back almost imperceptibly, but continued her examination as though there had been no resentment in Jaina's voice. What were you wearing at the time? Our cloaks, Jaina said. Your Jedi cloaks? They're just cloaks. Jaina had stood at enough witness rails in the last few years to know that the Inquisitor was trying to bolster a weak case with the mystique of her Jedi witnesses, a sure sign that Jihad did not understand or respect the Jedi role in the galaxy. Jedi don't wear uniforms. Surely you can't mean to suggest that a criminal of Red Star's intelligence failed to recognize. Jihad paused to reconsider her phrasing. Tribunal inquisitors were supposed to be impartial investigators, though in practice, most limited their efforts to presenting enough evidence to lock away the accused. Jedi Solo, do you mean to suggest that the crew could have legitimately believed you to be pirates? I don't know what they believed, Jaina said. Jihad narrowed her eyes and studied Jaina in silence. Despite Luke Skywalker's advice after the war to avoid involving the Jedi in the mundane concerns of the new government, the challenge of rebuilding the galaxy obliged much of the Order to do just that. There were just too many critical missions that only a Jedi could perform, with too many dire consequences for the Galactic Alliance, and most Reconstruction Authority bureaucrats had come to view the Jedi Order as little more than an elite branch of interstellar police. Finally, Jaina explained, I was too busy fighting to probe their thoughts. Jihad let out a theatrical sigh. Jedi Solo, isn't it true that your father once made his living as a smuggler? That was before my time, Inquisitor. Jaina's retort drew a hiss of laughter from the spectator area. where two of her fellow Jedi Knights, Tisar Sabatine and Lobaka, sat waiting for her to finish. And what would that have to do with the price of spice on Nal Hutta? Jihad turned to the panel of magistrates. Will you please instruct the witness to answer? Everyone knows the answer, Jaina interrupted. It's taught in half the history classes in the galaxy. Of course it is. The Inquisitor's voice grew artificially compassionate, and she pointed to the Yaka captive. Would it be possible that you identify with the accused, that you are reluctant to testify against a criminal because of your father's own ambivalent relationship with the law? No. Jaina found herself squeezing the witness rail as though she meant to crimp the cold metal. In the last 5 standard years, I've captured 37 warlords and broken more than 100 smuggling. Suddenly, the sense of desperation grew more tangible in the Force, more clear and familiar. Jaina's gaze turned back to the viewport, and she did not finish her answer. Wait! Tahiri Vela raised a hand, and the two Yuuzhan Vong standing before her fell silent. The two groups of spectators watched her expectantly, but she remained quiet and stared into Zonama Seacoat's blue sky. Over the last few weeks, she had begun to sense a distant foreboding in the Force, a slowly building dream, and now that feeling had developed into something more, into anguish and despair. Jedi Vela? Asked the smaller of the speakers. With one blind eye and a lumpy, lopsided face, he was one of the extolled, a disfigured class once known as the Shamed Ones. They had earned their new name by rising up against their upper caste oppressors to help end the war that had nearly destroyed both the Yuuzhan Vong and the civilized galaxy. Is something wrong? Yes. Tahiri forced her attention back to the group. Their blue-rimmed eyes and leathery faces seemed more familiar to her than the reflection of the blonde-haired woman she saw in the mirror every morning. But that was hardly a surprise, considering what had happened to her during the war. She was as much Yuuzhan Vong now as she was human, at least in mind and spirit. But it doesn't have anything to do with this. Go on. The extolled one, Bava, she remembered, bowed deeply, intentionally lowering himself to her height. As I was saying, Jedi Vela, 4 times this week we have caught Sal Gator and his warriors stealing from our gardens. Tahiri cocked her brow. Your gardens, Baba? Laokio was supposed to be a communal village, an experiment where the contentious caste of Yuuzhan Vong society would learn to work together and to trust each other. I thought the gardens belonged to everyone. We have decided that every Grashel is also allowed to plant an extra plot for itself. Bava sneered in Gator's direction, then continued. But the warriors are too lazy to work their own ground. They expect us to do it for them. We cannot do it for ourselves, Gator objected. Half a meter taller than Tahiri and nearly 3 times her mass, he still bore the tattoos and ritual scarrings of a former subaltern. We are cursed by the gods. Nothing we plant will grow. Tahiri fought back a sigh. Don't tell me you've separated by caste again. You're supposed to be living in mixed groups. As Tahiri spoke, she felt the familiar touch of a Chadra fan searching for her in the Force, wanting to know if she also sensed the growing strength in the feeling. She opened herself to the contact and focused her thoughts on the mysterious fear. Tekli was not particularly strong in the Force, and what Tiri perceived as a clarion call would seem barely a whisper to the little Chadra fan. Neither of them bothered to reach out for their companion Danny Kui. Force-sensitive though she might be, so far Danny had proven numb to the sensation. Living in mixed Grashels is unclean, Gator said, drawing Tahiri's attention back to the problems in Laokio. Warriors cannot be asked to sleep on the same dirt as shamed ones. Shamed ones, Bava said. We are extolled. We are the ones who expose Shimra's heresy, while you warriors led us all to ruin. The blue rim around Gator's eyes grew wider and darker. Beware your tongue, Ral, lest its poison strike you dead. There is no poison in truth. Bava sneaked a glance in Tahiri's direction, then sneered. You are the shamed ones now. Gator's hand sent Bava tumbling across the rug grass, so swiftly that Tahiri doubted she could have intercepted it had she wanted to, and she did not want to. The Yuuzhan Vong would always have their own way of working out problems, ways that Danny Kui and Tekli, and perhaps even Zonama Seacoat itself, would never fully comprehend. Bava stopped rolling and turned his good eye in Tahiri's direction. She returned his gaze and did nothing. Having risen from their outcast status through their efforts to end the war, the extolled ones were proving eager to find another caste to take their place. Tahiri thought it might be good to remind them of the consequences of such behavior. Besides, the feeling was growing stronger and clearer. She had the sense that it was coming from someone she knew, someone who had been trying to reach her and Tekli for a very long time. Come fast. The voice arose inside Tahiri's mind, clear and distinct and eerily familiar. Come now. The words seemed to fade even as Jason Solo perceived them, sinking below the threshold of awareness and vanishing into the boggy underlayers of his mind. Yet the message remained, the conviction that the time had come to answer the call he had been feeling over the last few weeks. He unfolded his legs. He was sitting cross-legged in the air, and lowered his feet to the floor of the meditation circle. A chain of soft pops sounded as he crushed the tiny blada vines that spilled out of the seams between the larstone paving blocks. I'm sorry, Akana. I must go. Akana answered without opening her eyes. If you are sorry, Jason, you must not go. A lithe woman with an olive complexion and dark hair. She appeared closer to Jason's age than her own 5 standard decades. She sat floating in the center of the meditation circle, surrounded by novices who were trying to imitate her with varying degrees of success. Sorrow is a sign that you have not given yourself to the current. Jason considered this, then dipped his head in acknowledgement. Then I'm not sorry. The call continued in the force, a needle-sharp pang that pulled at Jason deep inside his chest. And I must go. Now Akana opened her eyes. What of your training? I'm grateful for what you've shown me so far. Jason turned to leave. I'll continue when I return. No. As Akana spoke, the meditation circle exit vanished behind a vine-strewn wall. I cannot permit that. Jason stopped and turned to face her. Illusions aren't necessary. If you don't wish me to return, I won't. What I don't wish is for you to leave. Akana floated over to him and lowered her own feet. She was so immersed in the white current that even the delicate blada leaves did not pop beneath her weight. It's too soon. You're not ready. Jason forced himself to remain patient. After all, he was the one who had sought out the Falanasi. I have completed many trainings, Akana. What I have learned is that every order believes its way to be the only way. I'm not speaking of monks and witches, Jason Solo. I am speaking of you. Her dark eyes caught his gaze. Your feelings are unclear. Someone calls, and you go without knowing why. Then you feel it too. No, Jason. You are as clumsy in the current as your uncle. Your feelings have ripples, and ripples can be read. Does the call come from your brother? No. Anakin died in the war. It had been 8 years. And Jason could finally speak those words with some measure of acceptance, with some recognition of the purpose his brother's death had served in the Force. It had been the turning point in the war, when the Jedi finally learned how to fight the Yuuzhan Vong and not become monsters themselves. I've told you that. Yes, but is it him? Akana stepped closer to Jason, and his nostrils filled with the scent of the waha plants that grew in the temple bathing pool. After someone sinks beneath the current, a circle of ripples remains behind. Perhaps it is the ripples you sense. That does not make what I feel any less real, Jason countered. Sometimes the effect is all we can know of the cause. Do you remember my words only so you can use them to spar with me? Akana's hand came up as though to bat him across the ear, and his own hand reflexively rose to block. She shook her head in disgust. You are a dreadful student, Jason Solo. You hear, but you do not learn. It was a rebuke to which Jason had grown accustomed during his 5-year search for the true nature of the Force. The Jinsari, the Ang-Ti, even the witches of Dathomir had all said similar things to him, usually when his questions about their view of the Force grew too probing. But Akana had more reason than the others to be disappointed in him. Striking another would be anathema to any adept of the white current. All Akana had done was lift her hand. It had been Jason who interpreted the action as an attack. Jason inclined his head. I learn, but sometimes slowly. He was thinking of the 2 apparitions he had already seen of his dead brother. The first, when a cavern beast on Yuuzhan Tar used one to lure him into its throat. The second, on Zonama, when Seacoat had taken Anakin's form while they talked. You think I'm giving form to this call, that I impose my own meaning on the ripples I feel. What I think is not important, Akana said. Still yourself, Jason, and see what is really in the current. Jason closed his eyes and opened himself to the white current, in much the same way he would have opened himself to the Force. Akana and the other adepts taught that the current and the Force were separate things, and that was true, but only in the sense that any current was different from the ocean in which it flowed. In their essential wholeness, they were each other. Jason performed a quieting exercise he had learned from the Theron listeners, then focused on the call. It was still there, a cry so sharp it hurt, in a voice he remembered and could not identify. Come, help, a male voice, but one he recognized as not belonging to his brother. And there was something else too, a familiar presence that Jason did know, not sending the call, but reaching out along with it. Jaina. Jason opened his eyes. It's not Anakin, or his ripples. You're certain? Jason nodded. Jaina senses it too. That was what his sister was trying to tell him. He knew. Their twin bond had always been strong, and it had only grown stronger during his wanderings. I think she intends to answer it. Akana looked doubtful. I feel nothing. You aren't her twin. Jason turned and stepped through the wall illusion hiding the exit, only to find Akana, or the illusion of Akana, blocking his way. Please ask the Pyderians to bring my ship down from orbit. I'd like to leave as soon as possible. I'm sorry, but no. Akana's eyes caught his gaze again and held it almost physically. You have the same power I once sensed in your Uncle Luke, but without the light. You must not leave before you have found some. Jason was stung by her harsh assessment, but hardly surprised. The war against the Yuuzhan Vong had brought the Jedi a deeper understanding of the Force, one that no longer saw light and dark as opposing sides, and he had known before he came that the Falanasi might find this new view disturbing. That was why he had hid it from them, or thought he had. I'm sorry you disapprove, Jason said, but I no longer view the Force in terms of light and dark. It embraces more than that. Yes, we have heard about this new knowledge of the Jedi. Akana's tone was scornful, and it troubles my heart to see that their folly now rivals their arrogance. Folly? Jason did not want to argue, but, being one of the first advocates of the new understanding, he felt compelled to defend his views. That folly helped us win the war. At what price, Jason? Akana's voice remained gentle. If the Jedi no longer look to the light, how can they serve it? Jedi serve the Force, Jason said. The Force encompasses both light and dark. So now you are beyond light and dark? Akana asked. Beyond good and evil? I'm no longer an active Jedi Knight, Jason answered. But yes, and you do not understand the folly in that. As Akana spoke, her gaze seemed to grow deeper and darker. The arrogance. What Jason understood was that the Falanasi had a rather narrow and rigid view of morality, but he did not say so. The call was continuing to pull at him inside, urging him to be on his way, and the last thing he wanted to do now was waste time in a debate that would change no one's mind. The Jedi serve only themselves, Akana continued. They are pompous enough to believe they can use the Force instead of submitting to it, and in this pride they have caused more suffering than they have prevented. With no light to guide you, Jason, and the power I sense in you, I fear you will cause even more. The frank words struck Jason like a blow, less because of their harshness than because of the genuine concern he sensed behind them. Akana truly feared for him, truly feared that he would become an even greater monster than his grandfather, Darth Vader. Akana, I appreciate your concern. Jason reached for her hands and found himself holding only empty air. He resisted the temptation to find her real body in the Force. Adepts of the White Current considered such acts intrusions just short of violence. But I won't find my light here. I have to go.